Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another TTRPG panel. Today, we are talking about sex on the table, sex and romance in tabletop role playing games. And I have some lovely folks to introduce you to. Now, as I do this, I'm going to put each of you on the spot to give me a recommendation of a game that you've either had a really positive experience with, or that you think the audience might be interested with for investigating some of these themes. Now, I am going to go clockwise. So we're going to start with Cadiosaurus. Wait, I have a little spiel. Cadiosaurus is a certified ADHD sex educator, mental health advocate, and full-time content creator. As a professional streamer and TTRPG influencer, she is passionate about opening conversations about neurodiversity and accessibility into the gaming community. Also, we once RP'd Shibario scene on this very channel.
We did. I was there for that.
You were. Kate.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And what's a game that you think we should have a look at?
One of my favorite sexy TTRPGs, which I'm gonna just humble brag on myself that I wrote about for Playboy magazine, it's called Here There Be Stretch Marks by Jubilee Finnegan. It is one of my favorite games in the entire world.
Do you know that was written for one of my game jams that I set up?
I didn't know that.
Is that such a fun small world thing?
You're so cool. You're so cool, Dylan.
That's so fun that you brought that up. That just that's one of my favorite things.
I use that game at least once a month in like teaching workshops and stuff. All the time that game comes up in my life. Thank you for the gift of that game jam.
Oh my god, that's so cool. That's awesome. Wow.
Well, wouldn't you know it? Up next, Dylan.
Hello.
Hi, Dylan is a game designer, actual play performer, host of the One Shot podcast, has a background as a survival sex worker, and that is integral to their experience in games and collaborative storytelling. Also hosts game jams that lead to games that end up being written about in Playboy. Oh my gosh.
Wild. That's so nuts.
Dylan, do you have a game you want to recommend to us?
I do want to recommend Let These Mermaids Touch Your Dick, maybe. A game from River House Games. It is played with those little sticky hand things that you can get in a quarter machine and a sex toy. And it is really fun. And it toes the line between like very silly and actually hot. And it's perfect.
That game was unavailable for years, and my show had something to do with I had a gorilling Lee on the show, and my show's technically the reason why it's up again. So
that's awesome. I hope every single answer has a weird small world connection. That way,
everyone get out your yarn board for this one. A big horny yarn board behind us. Okay, continue around the circle to Lex. Lex is a non-binary trans game designer and poet. They are the creator of Caltrop Core, a free open license system for making your own TTRPGs with over 250 games built by a diverse community of designers and writers. Hey, Lex.
Hi. My recommendation for a game is going to be Things Eldritch and Terrifying by Harpy Dora on Twitter, S August, also known as. And that's the game that my partner and I used to as an excuse to like meet up for the first time. And I'll tell that story later. But I have to recommend it. It works.
It works. Perfect. And continuing on to Darling Demon Eclipse, a scholar, journalist, and social worker who creates perverted games in her free time. She is best known as the host of TTRPG news and discussion show The Dovecote, and as the director of the queer kink fantasy game Sapphic World. Hi, Clay.
I'm going to recommend Tintoy, aka There's No Self, Only You by Geostationary. Really, really great game about a two-player TTRPG where one person plays as a subject and the other person plays as the person who's captured them, and the captor is slowly trying to kind of convert the subject into their image. It's very like very bimbofication, force femme, like that area of things. But you can really do whatever you want with it. And it's just a very like tightly designed game, designed around like cycles of play that slowly involve like very direct conversational alteration of kind of key phrases that relate to your character, and it's very fun.
Okay, amazing. And last but certainly not least, we have Austin Taylor. Austin is an award-winning game design narrative writer. Okay, winning game narrative writer, designer, performer, and friend. Thank you.
Yes.
I do you actually have an award for being a friend? I need to know.
Yeah, I do.
That's
8th grade.
incredible. Okay. And when not doing any of that, they are half of your new favorite nerd history podcast, Secret Histories of Nerd Mysteries. Also, they're the one who introduced sapphic sex to Solace on our show Beach episodes.
Episode 1.
Episode 1. I was like, this is a lighthearted slice of life. And you're like, I'm about to eat out that hottie in a gazebo. Let's go. So thank you so much for that. Hey, Austin, do you have a game recommendation?
I do. My recommendation is a solo journaling game. It's called Princess of a Cursed Dick. It's by Anna. Oh God, what's her last name? I have it right here.
Anthropy.
Yes, Anna Anthropy. Thank you. I was like, someone probably. Anyway, I just think sometimes you need to sit down by yourself and just have a really good time. You know. I think that's important. I think I was like, do I recommend a 2-player game or like a group game? And I was like, everyone else has that covered. I think a solo. Sometimes you got to crack open a solo journaling game by yourself with a bottle of wine. You know.
Yes.
So
So true.
Deeply, yes.
On my list was a game called Fill Every Hole, and it's a solo game, and you can decide what you want to do from there. But I'm glad we got a solo one in.
oh my God. All the solo games I always play are like really tragic, angsty games.
I
And
don't need that.
I play sexy games with my friends, but I'm like, wait, I can have sexy games all the time.
You could have, yeah. I can be angsty with my friends, you know. Like I can be Batman with my friends. That's fine. Sometimes you need a sexy game for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, now that we've drawn the connections, now normally I would start with a nice light question, but this one's a bit meta because the first thing we're going to talk about is censorship, because this stream itself is going to have some light censorship in it to comply with the Twitch terms of service. Please don't ban me, Bezos. I'm playing nice, okay? But my first question is, how do you think that these kinds of censorship on the various like platforms and media where we interact with and discover games often for the first time impacts like people's home games and how we conceive of like what a tabletop role-playing game is? And this is open to anyone who has a thought.
Oh.
No, you go, Austin.
Are you sure?
I'll go. Yes.
Okay. I love you.
I love you.
I think because I had an interesting moment of it where like in a recent home game, a player was hooking up with an NPC. And on our lines and veils, no one put anything down for sex. And so I was like, we like got to the scene, I was like, hey, no one putting down for lines and veils for sex. What do you guys think that means? And a lot of people are like, oh, like fade to black is okay. And it's like, okay, no one wrote that down. And I think a lot of people just assume that's what'll happen because that's what has to happen in all the places we consume games for most of us. And it isn't what we get for like TV necessarily, but I think a lot of people just think that because like most streams do that because you kind of have to. You can get a little steamy, but like for the most part, like you're gonna fade to black before there's like action. And I'll go to action if no one cares, if it's fine, we can do that. And so I think that's like one thing I've noticed is like a lot of people just like kind of assume like, well, of course he'll fade to black, and I'm like, why will I have me? No, incorrect.
Yeah,
I absolutely won't. I only will if I legally have to not get my friend banned from Twitch.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think that there's something about how, more people are discovering these kinds of games than ever because of the internet and because of actual play and because of access to information and things like that, which is awesome. But what censorship does is it limits discussion, and it limits how much we're able to showcase what goes on and what can go on and what is possible. And because of that, that doesn't mean that there's no sexy actual play or things like that. It does mean that some of the worst examples of that are going to be among the only ones. And so it becomes associated with something bad, something negative, something that should not be touched on, when that's not really like a wholesale case. When there's not a lot of examples of something, the one bad thing is going to be the elephant in the room, the it's going to take up most of the conversation. And then when I wind up introducing people to this aspect of games in smaller in-person queer spaces and spaces that have that, and people have no idea that that was even possible. And these are folks that like do watch a lot of actual play or do participate in a lot of game design and game jams and things like that online and just never get exposed to it. So unfortunately, censorship hurts us. It limits conversation around these things and limits the way we can prepare for them and engage with them in a positive way.
And I will say, when I solicited audience questions for this panel, a lot of people just said, like, I had one experience where a game got sexy and it got real uncomfortable real fast, and that's the only time this has happened. And so, like, or like, they've never seen a positive example, like you're saying, but a lot of people have had negative experiences. So yeah, a lot of confusion. I think that kind of brings us, is kind of merging our first two questions now. We got some game recommendations. We had our censorship disclosure. What are these games actually like then? Me, I was raised off PG-13 content. What is an erotic game versus a sexual game? We were talking about some that are more like silly haha versus like straight up a little raunchier. What kind of things what are these games like?
Well, to hit on the subject of censorship and lead into what you're the sort of games element. I'm I don't know if I would call myself a founder, because I feel like I kind of latched onto something that was developing, but I am like very deeply involved in a queer arts movement that I will refer in this panel as cigarette games.
Bundle of
so-
sticks games.
Bundle of
Okay?
six games. So I think one of the things that I found really surprising when I did a jam for cigarette games last month was that I was getting a lot of pieces that were really hard and really heavy and like really, really serious. I was getting work that was very, silly and porny and like, playful. And then I was getting work that, for example, I think it's called For Steel We Are. Let me double check. Derek Bindell made a really great game. Yes, For Steel You Are. Derek Bindell made this really great game where you're a robot entering a megastructure, and it's like a bunch of tables, and the megastructure is slowly trying to consume you. And there's no like physical flesh and blood erotica in that game, but it is extremely hot. Like, it is really sexually charged because it's about going into a place and being subsumed by a thing that is like greater than you, that loves you, that wants you this cold metal thing to love it. And so I think sexual and erotic games can look like a lot of very different things. And I think often it has to be more about like a philosophy than a definition.
I think to continue that thought, the game I recommended, Things Eldritch and Terrifying, there's no like sexy stuff in it, but it's about an eldritch being trying to seduce a human into letting it into our dimension, which is incredibly hot. That's all the opportunities for temptation, for giving in, and for like, yeah, like the game doesn't have sex in it. Let me tell you, after the game, there was,
You know,
we had a good time.
Fade to black.
there was
And so I
the camera pan to a lampshade. We turned
fade to
off.
black, I guess. I don't know. So, oh yeah, did you have a question?
No, I was going to add on that, but if you've got
Yeah.
more, this is great. Tell me,
Yeah.
tell me
I was just-
everything.
there are also, and like when I held kind of like a precursor jam to the cigarette jam called the TTRPG jam, just like a fun wordplay, a little bit more of like a kind of entry level way of getting into these types of games. I was just like, anything that's kind of sexy, it goes, so that people could be kind of prepared for the upcoming cigarette jam, which has a lot of important things to it. But for these, I was getting like, I was finding out like, oh, you can have like a Powered by the Apocalypse game, and sometimes you just gotta, if you roll poorly, just gotta suck something, And I'm like, oh, very cool. Like you can do that in games. That wasn't like, I was more of like the games that are like atmospherically tense, or they kind of like breed tension, and there's this hotness to it, being swallowed by this huge thing that loves you and wants you to be a part of it. Like, God, I'm gonna have to turn my fan up. But there's like a lot of different ways to approach this type of game, which is what Eclipse was saying.
It's so interesting because I am also like, so I'm a certified sex educator who is also asexual, demisexual, gray sexual. I don't know, whatever you want to call me. I don't like sex that much, but I do talk about it on the internet. And something that I find so interesting about these types of games is how abstract the intimacy can be, or how directly erotic and sexualized the intimacy can be. Like, for example, the game that I talked about at the beginning is Here There Be Stretch Marks, where it's literally like you are with a partner who is, I mean, they can be clothed if you want, but generally I've encouraged people to play it naked, where it's you are exploring a partner's body and you are building a map onto them, like their stretch marks, their flaws, their freckles, their whatever. And it's so intimate. But whether or not it becomes a sexual thing or whether or not it becomes an eroticized thing, I think it's really up to the players and what they bring to the experience. And so I don't know, I just get, my little nerd heart gets so excited talking about this kind of stuff, because I think even if you are a person like me who isn't necessarily super excited about like the sex act, the intimacy and the closeness that some of these games can bring is so powerful and so fascinating. End of sentence. I just tend to like fade out at the end. It's fine.
No, and I think that's interesting too, because when I was thoroughly reading the Twitch terms of service for this panel, some very thoroughly, it was so much about like what is considered too sexual is basically whatever turns people on. And I'm like, you have not met the degenerates I've met,
That's
because
bad
like
news for you, buddy.
it's
Yeah.
like, what does that mean even? So I think that, when we're talking about like sexual games, that could be a silly haha, we're joking about sex, dick jokes, whatever. It could be that we're like talking through an act. It could be that you're building a lot of tension, like erotic tension. And then it could be that afterwards you put the game away and you get on top of that table. Which I think brings me really beautifully into our next question, because we had some questions about bleed. And so, for those who have not heard this term before, bleed is when feelings that are developed within the fiction, within the character, spill out into the real world. That maybe there is an experience between two characters that now you're not sure if you're with the players. But I think a few examples we've talked about would probably count as bleed. We're like, we built this tension within a game and then explored it out of the game. So how do you think the concepts of how we talk about bleed relates to these kinds of games, and how do we mitigate it or lean into it, and how do we navigate that space?
So I want to talk about, again, and this again kind of gets tied to censorship. And also, while we were discussing that, I saw that some people in the comments were bringing up purity culture, and I just want to kiss you, because that all is very, entangled in the fact that these are things that shut down, communication, and communication is the way that we have these things with a good experience. Bleed is just something that's gonna happen. I mean, you play a character that it has a tragic backstory, and if you really let yourself like get into that and experience it, it doesn't matter if the tragedy is something you've actually experienced in real life. There is a really high probability that you will feel sad afterwards. And we've normalized how to talk about that with your table afterwards. That is becoming like a very increasingly normalized thing, and I love that. It's beautiful. We get timid and shy away from being open with each other when we experience feelings of attraction or arousal or love for someone that we have had a fictionalized version of those things with. And the best way to engage with something like that in a safe way that makes everybody feel good and also allows us to walk away from it afterwards, either changed by the experience or readjusted back to our regular selves, is to be able to talk about it and say, "Hey, I felt this thing. Um, can we talk about it? Can we unpack it? Did you feel that too? Do like is that something that we are exploring, or do we need to figure out how to get back from where we just explored?" Like those kinds of things are all important conversations to have, and if we shy away from them, that is how we're gonna get people doing messy teenager nonsense with each other and and not addressing it. So that's my piece.
I love mess when it's safe. Yeah, I feel like one of the things that I talk to people a lot in my day job is being a therapist, is like, and I do a lot of game stuff in my day job, is I'm always like, whenever you're playing a game, I don't care how much you think it's not part of you, it is. And I think one of the things with Bleed, or one of the things that can help with Bleed, is like understanding like if this part of you is attracted to that part of your friend, or if it's an actual play like your coworker or whatever, like I don't think it's bad to like want to explore that in this what could be a safe environment, like through this game. And I do think like the like what Dylan was saying, like the purity culture, like it really can do a lot of harm to people to not feel safe to explore that. That's all I wanted to say. It was just like understanding like whatever game you're playing, whatever fictionalized version of you it is, that it's a version of you and it comes from somewhere in you. And I think games are a really good way to explore those parts of ourselves, especially when it comes to like attraction and intimacy and eroticism and all this other stuff. Like in your imagination brain, you can like have anything you want, and it can be a really great way to explore that stuff.
I feel like I also need to do a little moment for any straights in chat. Hey, hey guys, you okay? Um, but like just experiencing attraction between two people doesn't inherently make things bad, which I think is something that is talked about a lot more in the queer community than it is in straight culture. So just looking at our demographic here, I just feel like maybe I just need to do a little shout out to my straights there. Sorry about it, guys. But hey, be the change you want to see, right? Talk to your friends about how maybe smooching them would be cool.
I
Oh, sorry,
sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go.
Okay. One thing I wanted to add about Bleed is I think that there are two sides of it. One is like, I mean, I can make this one thing. So like, what do you do after you've how does Bleed interact with play after you've kind of made that relationship, develop a relationship with someone? And for me personally, and this might be a little TMI, but like, I have games with polycules with partners where it's like you can jack off. Like that's just like, bar one. You can jack off during this. And I think part of the other element is that I want to talk about is like I had mentioned pre panel, like bleed can be getting aroused. Bleed can be all of these things. And as long as your table has discussed these things, like you're I won't necessarily say you're totally fine, but at least you're not swimming without a paddle, rowing without a paddle. Swimming, you don't need a paddle to swim.
I actually I'm gonna go because I feel like you just set me up so beautifully for that. Because like I'm also really interested in the intentionality of bleed, right? Like I think that there's a difference between I'm playing just your average bog standard, game of D&D with my friends, and boy, that bard. Boy, I'm catching some feelings for the bard, right? Boy, I'm catching some feelings for the player that's playing the bard because he's doing it so well. And intentionalized specific bleed that is designed to carry over into the next moment. Like one of another game that I think of is there's one called Feeding Lucy, which is basically just vampire roleplay. It is straight up just gamified, roll a d20 of vampire role play. One of you's the vampire, one of you's the Lucy. What's going to happen, right? And it's a structure and it's a framework in which you can just end the game, right? Or if that bleed continues, then it becomes like and now we're setting up for, a different type of intimacy after this play that we've had. And I think it's really interesting because that's how I tend to use these type of games. I tend to use these with the intentionality of, and this is going to bring me into a headspace of now I'm more interested in pursuing intimacy, or I am more turned on, or something like that. And I don't know. I think that's neat.
And you'd be right. That's pretty neat.
Correct. It is neatness confirmed. Thank you so much.
Hey, talking about intentionally setting up scenes with parameters and role play is making me think of something else. So I want to throw out, because one thing I've noticed, we got a lot of questions about safety tools. And how to employ safety tools. And we can get into that of any safety tools you think you want, but I wanted to talk about specifically, I've noticed that a lot of the most common safety tools in tabletop role-playing games are modeled after BDSM safety tools. The concept of safe words and like the, red, yellow, green, and the veils and all that thing being in advance. So I want to talk a bit about the crossover there, specifically with the safety context. And I can see Kate just like vibrating.
Listen,
Yeah.
here's your answer. It's because the Venn diagram of kinky people who play D&D is a circle, and therefore that's kind of a joke, but only kind of.
Only kind of.
But no, like I do a lot of kink, I do a lot of like BDSM education, and it is so interesting to me how the communication at the table panels that I run are identical to the communication in kink panels that I run. The only thing that I'm saying differently is game and scene. And I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts that I'm galaxy braining over, and how deep and how how deep and how long do you want me to go? I did that on accident. I want you to know that. But yeah, it's I think the idea of consent within TTRPGs is so closely held, especially we've seen this conversation come up very frequently in the past decade or so. And so the idea of informed consent, what am I opting into beforehand? How is it going to be negotiated beforehand? How is it going to look like? What is it going to look like in the moment? And then aftercare, right? What happens after? How are we taking care of ourselves after? That sort of before, during, and after process that you see as a discussion in BDSM, I think perfectly aligns with the table, right? Because if you are a person who's dealing with bleed, or you are a person who's dealing with some big feelings because your character died or something like that, like aftercare may be a super valuable part of the process. And talking about it beforehand is going to be what allows you to stay safe and make sure that your needs are being met and taken care of. I kind of feel like that was an answer. Somebody else talk now, please.
It's a great one. I wanted to take this kind of opportunity to talk about like and echoing what you said, Kate, but like communication throughout the process of play versus trying to set walls and parameters around things that that won't move. There's nothing wrong with doing that necessarily. It's just that we're imperfect people, and we're playing a game usually that's centered around improvising with each other and like moving together throughout a space. And those things, trying to memorize a list of things that you can and cannot do is probably gonna lead to more bumps and scrapes along the road. And I think of this, this is something that when I came into being super involved in gaming, this is something where my like sex work background really informed how I do these things, because many times there was a list of like there were a list of hard and soft lines in my head. But they could never be all expansive and all inclusive of everything that would come up when I was with somebody. And sometimes you are in a scenario with someone and you have felt safe and comfortable, and they bring something up that you didn't expect, and it may have been something that in a different scenario with a different person in a different experience would not be okay with you, and somehow in this instance it is. And we only get to have those kinds of experiences if we get comfortable talking to each other throughout the process, making it okay to pause and check in on things, step back, step in and out of character, take these little breaks to feel each other out, and to allow yourself the ability to be flexible with one another as your desires, lines, and boundaries kind of shift normally with each other.
So I wanted to jump in just really quick. I just wanted to echo, like, I think some people have that fear of like what Dylan was just saying about like that it would slow things down or make it less fun. But in the same way that I would hope you can like check in with someone in a scene, like it makes it, I promise it makes it more fun. I promise you'll have a more fun experience, even if you're not like necessarily doing something that feels super intimate. If you're like feeling some type of way, like pause and say that. It doesn't have to make it less fun. It makes it more fun. Because I find it was making me think in my home game. I was like, we had more fun that I checked in with people than if I just like went in because I was like, well, everyone said it was fine. They didn't mark it down. Um, because going off of like one check-in that you did with someone for a game maybe months ago, even if it was 3 hours ago, right? Like if you like just checked in, like it's so much can change in 30 minutes. 30 minutes ago, I wanted takeout, and now I want to cook after this. You know, like a lot can change in 30 minutes.
That is like such a good point, because it's people like someone was saying we're humans. Dylan, I think, was saying we're humans. We don't always get it right. We can't always foresee what things might come up. And I think the reason that kink and RPGs have just the same conversation around it, because they're both about like how do you manage a shared narrative between like multiple people, right? Like how do you set boundaries? Like even if you're like doing like written role play, like what are your rules for like, can I take control of your character in D&D? That's heresy, but in certain other situations, other games, other kinks, it might be different. And so it's just like these. It is really interesting, and brought this question of being like, I don't really know what I'm asking, but like it's kind of cool, right? And we were all like, yep, that's very cool, because it is this. How do we talk about a story we're building together? And that's BDSM is a story. You've got the dom, you've got a sub, you've got whoever, all that stuff. It's like when I came into the hobby, it was always like sex workers and kink people involved in kink who were like, here's how consent and safety tools work. And I'm like, just every day still thankful for sex workers, always. And it is just, oh, we've learned two things at the same time now.
Yeah. Okay. I have so many thoughts. All right. So, okay. Safety tools are largely just tools for communication, right? But then also in the chat, some people are talking about like, well, what if I've kind of like I've internalized the puritanical thing where I'm uncomfortable talking about these things. And someone pointed out that in our auto captions here, hello. In our
Sorry,
auto
yeah.
captions, some of the words are being censored just when we're trying to talk about it. So, like, literally, it can be very difficult to talk about these things. Um, so, I wanted to throw it out there. If anyone has any suggestions for tools we can use to have these conversations, if we haven't done it before, is there something that you think might help someone approach this kind of conversation?
I think just
I
one thing to
mean,
say is,
Mhm.
is that safety tools that as we see them online and like resources are a starting point. They're not the only, like, you have to be able to check in. You have to be able to be flexible. Things can change, and like you have to be. I think you don't have to be. It's more fun for everyone and healthier if you're able to change your mind and that you have the feeling and trust of the people around you to do that.
I am going to actively drop one of my favorites into the chat for everyone to, because this is another resource that I give to people all the time. It's by a fabulous, fabulous educator named Bex Caputo. And it is geared more towards sex and intimacy, but what's really interesting is that Bex also chooses to. My dog is freaking out. I'm so sorry, you guys. So sorry.
That's a good puppy.
Doing Big Protect.
Big
They're
protect.
just
I'm
paying
doing the
their
heck
rent.
and
They're just
protect.
paying their rent.
But and I was like, I need to like set it up so it's like my dog doesn't get up on the microphone. But Bex specifically in this guide that I will link in the chat in a second here, specifically talks about communication and how to talk, right? Because that's something that I think is really fascinating is how do we communicate as people. And some people it's like I don't like to have awkward conversations face to face. I like to write out my thoughts and have like an email, or I like to text, or I like to do whatever, right? And so even the how do we have the conversation component can be really I don't want to say difficult, but it can be challenged if you also have a person who might not know how they like to have difficult conversations. And so making part of the safety guidelines and the safety checklists just simply things like, hey, do you like to sit side by side when you have a tough conversation? Do you like to make eye contact? Do you want the overhead light to be on? Because no, you don't. We all know that, right? The answer is no. And so yeah, I'll go ahead and link that in the chat. I just got to pull it up here on my computer, but it's just such a good resource, and it works for sex and intimacy. It also like honestly works for TTRPGs. It's amazing. So here it comes at some point.
Yeah.
To answer your, sorry,
No,
to
no.
answer your question, Anne, about what are tools, what are resources that you use? My blunt answer would be like a gun, like killing the cop in your head, like, and I know that comes off as like a little nonchalant, but like earnestly, I think one of the best things that I did for myself, for my work, for understanding the work of others, for being in queer community with queer people who have uh kinks that are like a lot more intense than mine, is just like looking at everything just head on and being like, okay, this is a thing that someone made intentionally, in full knowledge of what it is and what it means, and where do I go from there? How do I understand this thing? I'm also going to flip my camera.
Okay, thank you. All right, and I will post that link
Thanks,
because
Ian.
I got you.
I was all confident. I was like, I'm gonna give out the resource, and then I immediately realized I wasn't allowed to do that. It's fine.
Listen, I have so many rules in my
Talk about
Twitch chat of
safety.
things.
I
Yeah.
don't know if this is part of that article, but there was something, Kate, that like changed the way that I have like that I do discussions outside of games, outside of sex and intimacy, but just like if you're trying to have like a uncomfortable conversation with a friend or a partner, that like you are both more likely to feel defensive and towards one another if you are facing each other directly while you have that conversation. And I don't remember where exactly I read that, but it changed how I engage with that forever, and it's so much better.
Yeah. And it's I don't know, communication as a whole is like one of my special interests, but I think that especially when we are talking about people who may not know or may not feel comfortable talking about certain things. I think that the biggest gift that you can give to any player at your table is that gift of let's just get comfortable. Let's just get comfortable talking. And even if the actual conversation doesn't go very well, or even if it's like clunky and awkward, the gift of holding space for that and the gift of being able to say, hey, you know what? I know that it is weird to talk about some of these topics, but like I'm here for you and we're going to get through it together. That's so important and so powerful, I think, especially for, exploring more intense topics.
I think too, and this gets harder depending on who's the person who has a hard time having the hard conversation. But I think the other thing is like, at least part of like what I adopt a lot of when I'm running the game is like the same way if I'm a facilitator for a scene, because that's usually the role I play in a scene, is like if I am, for lack of better terms, because I didn't read the TOS, in charge, let's say, then it's kind of my job to I will usually like check in with someone digitally. We'll say, hey, what are things that you have a hard time talking about that you can maybe write down here, and we can come up with a way for you to talk about it so we can have the conversation. There's more than one person. If there are at least two people, if you're the one that is in charge of your game, then it does kind of fall to you to like check in again, back to checking in and being like, hey, what will be hard for you to talk about? You think. Again, we're not perfect. Things can change. One will come up. This is what it's all about. But like, I think that is something that I personally take on, that I think it is important for someone to take on. And it may not be the person running the game. Maybe there's like another player who's really good at that, or someone's friend who's like, I just like to watch. That's fine too. But like, I think it is like kind of, I've heard of some people, like people in games now have adopted like a safety coordinator, and I'm like, man, we're just spinning around kink, huh? Like someone the other day was like, a safety coordinator for games, and I was like, huh, okay, I wonder what we'll pick up next. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just very interesting to see these two worlds, to be a part of two worlds and then become one family,
I think it's the like puritanical culture that makes us more comfortable with like hiring someone to do that. Mm-hmm. And like that's their job. And so like we feel more comfortable. I don't know. I'm kind of, spitballing here, but it kind of ties in. I've definitely, I grew up very religious and am not anymore. So that kind of thing, it really infiltrates. I'm still like picking Nerf darts from that, like out of my, whatever, my soup. I don't know. That's not a thing people say.
You're not going to have a safety coordinator with you if you're playing this with your friend or partner in the privacy of your home. You have to be able to face discomfort together. You have to be able to, talk to each other openly and honestly, and you have to be able to like conflict resolve with each other. And those are skills that are good for you to develop. You should try to develop them with the people close to you, regardless of whether you're going to play games like this or not. You should just be doing that. Having a safety coordinator, if you're doing this for an audience, different story. That's awesome. That rules.
I want to say, I think that kind of methodology going in will not only help you with sexy games, it'll help you with unsexy games too. It'll also just help you with like intimate relationships and honestly unintimate relationships. Just a good skill to develop.
I was going to add an element of cigarette games has been sort of a critique and reevaluation of safety, especially insofar as it is only restrictive and doesn't focus on desire. And I think a very good safety tool that one of my friends, Jay Dragon, made, the safety palette, is a really good way to kind of get around that. And I think broadly, it is very important to think in terms of what you want and not just what you don't want to see. And I feel like I had another point here, but it's lost to me. So that's all I'm going to say. Go read that blog. It's great.
I'm not on the panel, but I have a thought. And last time people yelled at me for not sharing my thoughts, which is I also think this is something that I think about a lot as a forever GM with certain cognitive limitations. That sometimes if you put all the onus on one person to maintain the safety of a space, and that person is also doing a lot of other tasks, and maybe that person can't think when there's a weird sound, okay? Maybe. Instead of having it as like an ongoing conversation woven through the whole thing where we're working together, we're all checking in, everyone feels empowered to stop the action. It's not like one person. It feels like much more conducive to everyone's safety and empowerment, and also my poor little brain, please. Okay, I have a question here, which I really like, because some people are asking in the chat, they're like, can I play these kind of games if I'm playing with an ex or someone I've had an entanglement? If it's someone else who's in a monogamous relationship that I'm not a part of, who can we play these games with? Who should we not play these games with?
You
If
know,
I'm not allowed to do that, they might have to cart me away right now.
you know, who you can play these games with is a great conversation for you to have with yourself and the person you're playing the games with, and if your partner has an opinion, them too. There's not like a rule that exists outside of like the relationships you have in your life. I guess unless someone puts it in their game, but that'd be a really weird rule.
Yeah,
In the game, you coward. You must play this with an ex.
you have to play this.
That's
with an
actually really good, though.
Play this with an ex.
Game jam.
Yeah.
Really
Game
good.
jam.
Yeah. You
Some
have to
cooking
play
stuff
this
here.
with somebody who you have feelings for, but they don't feel it back. Oh, hard.
It's titled
You have to.
This game is called The Mess.
That's considered self-abuse. That's
Yeah.
self-harm to me.
Hard mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not like a rule, I would say, that's like a rule of thumb outside of like, don't play it with someone you personally don't want to.
Yeah, you have to know your own limitations. Is what this is,
I think also to give some people an example, since I'm monogamous with my partner, and I know a lot of the examples we get are with, thankfully, with polyamory and bigger ways of loving and all that stuff. Our relationship is just monogamous, and so we do have those conversations sometimes. Like in the beginning, like my partner's really into written role play and has done written role play with their friends growing up, since middle school and before then. And of course, there's like funny cringe sex stuff in there, but also like romantic things, and that's something we talked about. Like, because I was also like in the beginning of our relationship doing more like actual play guest spots, and like developing those relationships with other people on the cast and being like, hey, is this something that you'd be open to with your character? And then like, is my partner okay with that? And your partner might not care at all. Like it might be a non-issue, but you still need to like talk about it and let them know. And monogamous doesn't even mean one thing. Like if some people might think that's cheating. Like if my partner's having like romantic written role play between characters, to them that might be like across the line. For us, it's not an issue. So even like kind of confronting your own like insecurities about that kind of thing as well, like about even in a monogamous relationship, jealousy and like possessive attitudes are not really healthy, and there's things that you can do to work through that, and it's all again comes down to communication.
And also, God forbid you play a game that makes you hurt, like makes you feel something that hurts a little bit. Like,
oh, thank you. Yeah, I love
not to be the messy bitch here, but like, I think it's okay if like you play in a game that makes you feel things for other people in ways that might be complicated, that opens up conversations about, do I want to be polyamorous? Am I happy in the relationship that I'm currently in? Like, I think it's okay if games transform you, personally.
Who
That's
hasn't played a
100%.
TV?
Yeah, that's so good. Like
Sorry.
To give an example of like I bleed one time, like as a monogamous person in a T for T monogamous relationship. We were playing Nighthawks with Tales Yet Told with Kendo Makes Films and Gwen and Ibrahim, and my character and Gwen's character had like an encounter, and after the game I was like feeling it, so I went and talked to my partner about it and just express the feelings, and it kind of like I just like gave myself room to like let it out and feel it. Like bottling it up is a great way to never be rid of it. And that's so like letting it out. And I don't think I've said a lot to like Kendo and Gwen that like that game really, that session really means a lot to me. I say it all the time, but like I didn't really have any conversations with Gwen about like that interaction. I was like, oh, that's cool. And now this is someone that I really want to be friends with and have in my life because we had that connection. But it didn't like stay as like a romantic feeling. I just like went and like told my partner, and we were like, oh, that's really cool that, you know, and it was a game I designed. So I was like very proud that like it was that because of that I added a page about bleed to the physical printing. And it's like I was just proud that my game could do that. It's like it is a positive thing to have these like uncomfortable. That's why I really love all these different types of games. Like how many different lives can you live? How many different like people can you try being? Like I'm sure it's very common for a lot of us to have explored queerness through RPGs before we were ready to like, you know, like I had a friend one time who told me like when we first met, they were using he him pronouns at the time, and they said I play exclusively tall large women in D&D, and I was like, that's not a cis person. I'm sorry.
We got another one.
I've never seen, and then once they got to he they, I've never seen a faster transition to they them. It was so fast. You had that they on there, it was off to the races. And so, you know, it takes time for everybody to get there and things like that. But that's one of the great things is you can like kind of bump up against this uncomfortable feeling you've been having in a safe space, hopefully with people you trust.
And I just want to kind of reiterate too, because kind of circling back on our discussion about safety tools, and what Austin said earlier is like, I love mess when it's safe. Safe doesn't necessarily mean comfortable. Those aren't the same thing. And I think sometimes we can conflate that in certain safety tool like models. And so sitting with yourself, talking to people, communicating, being like, what's discomfort? It's so funny to me how many parallels I'm getting between this and the horror panel I did recently. Very similar conversation of like, how do we explore uncomfortable topics safely, even if we're getting it like psychologically, they do call it arousal when you're like fight or flight is like up. So it's like,
oh, sure
is.
So I'm like arousal or arousal together. So we're all perverted freaks. We are coming to the approaching the end. So I have a sort of big question for us to close on, which is a lot of people, when I put out a call for questions, just said, "Help, what do? Want play sexy games, scared, shy, help." So I wanted to put it to y'all, any advice you have for someone who's either wanting to explore these kinds of games or explore these themes in a game that they're already playing, and who might not know where to start. Any advice at all? And it can be reiterating or introducing a brand new idea, whatever you want.
Oh, go ahead.
You go first.
You let me go first last time.
Oh, okay, all right. I'll take this one first, just because I wanted to say something also, and this is kind of drawing in on how we just ended that discussion with this comfort versus safe idea. And I think everybody is probably going to have amazing, excellent advice about playing this with people that you know, and in trusting environments like that. I think there is something to be said as someone who used to do sex work and now does occasionally something that is a little bit of a hybrid, where I do facilitate like sexy games with people in queer spaces for money. And in those instances, I do take on the role of a professional, wherein it is part of my job to keep the person safe and to keep myself safe. And so there is nothing wrong with trying to have this experience for the first time by seeking out somebody who does this professionally in a space that's either a local queer space, and online spaces, things like that, where you can look and search for people who do this professionally, so that someone takes the responsibility of safety into their hands, and you can kind of have that experience as a guided activity before you start trying to do it on your own. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's just what I want to put out there.
I think that's great. My advice isn't actually playing with people you know and trust at all. My advice is you try it by yourself. I think you should explore it by yourself and explore what you like for in games before you like try playing it with a bunch of friends who may or may not be more or less experienced than you at exploring it, right? I think before you like go to your friend before you like go to your friends or partners or whatever, I think like find something in this vein of games that you can play by yourself and like see if you even find it fun. You may not find it fun, and that's fine. I don't control you. Like maybe you're like, if I'm gonna be role play sexy, I just want to like role play sexy with my partners, and I don't want a game for it. That's fine. You don't have to find this fun. Like I know a lot of people who don't find it fun who are like, I'd rather just like role play without games. And like that's cool. And so I think first explore that and see if you enjoy it in like a gamified way. And then if you do, then you can go to like you're getting partners, friends, other trusted loved ones in your life that you want to play these games with. And then like, you know, all the other stuff we said about safety and talking and all that stuff.
That's really good advice. Like I wouldn't have thought of that until you brought that up earlier. And like after you've done that and like kind of explored that, because it's if you're not comfortable with yourself, you're really not going to be comfortable like with someone else that you're trying to navigate this with. I think a thing to remember, like we said earlier, there's a lot of different types of these games. Like there isn't just a sex game. Like they're not like just mechanic. You roll dice to do foreplay or whatever. There's like games that are sexy without ever having sex in them. There are games that are explicitly about like romance. So for example, I've played Visigoths versus Molgoths with my friends on a stream. And, you know, it's explicitly about kind of flirting with your friends. And if everybody's okay with it, like that's a fun time that you get to just have. And I think Austin was saying like, or everybody was saying really, Eclipse too, like those feelings aren't a bad thing. Like though we don't have to try to avoid them. Like we can seek them out and deal with them and have a really rich time playing with each other. And even if you don't like have feelings for like develop a relationship, a romantic or sexual relationship with someone, you can really like find good friends that you like trust on like that vibe level, like the really core level where you're like, oh, this is just a person that I can really I feel comfortable with.
I have what is maybe a hot take, but I think one of the healthiest, one of the most vulnerable, one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to work on distilling what need you are looking to have filled or like what want you are wanting, right? Are you wanting to feel connection? Are you wanting to feel beautiful? Are you wanting to feel desired? Are you wanting to feel hot and bothered and get choked by a vampire? Are you, like what is the want that is at the core of the curiosity that you have around these games, right? Do you want to get better at flirting? Do you want to feel, I don't know, like cool? Do you want to feel like a cool little guy? Play some TTRPGs, right? But if you can kind of distill that down, that I think is a really beautiful first step into being able to sort of ask for what you need from the people that you are playing with, whether you're talking about in a game situation, in a kink BDSM way, in a scene type of way, but being able to sort of distill that and capture that I think is one of the best first steps, because wanting to feel beautiful, wanting to feel desired, wanting to feel connected to your partner are three very different things. And there are, hundreds of games out there. And one might be amazing at one type of thing, but not really great for another. So look for the game that is going to suit the want that you're feeling at your core.
Super easy, super chill process.
Super chill. Yeah, super easy. Should take you like 3 seconds, if
Step
not.
1, achieve enlightenment. Step 2,
Yeah.
nut in a TTRPG.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
shill a little bit. I'm going to encourage you to, and I believe we have the link loaded up. Go to the Cigarette Game Salon, which is a Discord that I run for the purpose of developing and and creating and playing cigarette games among community. And go to the roles and pronouns section, click on the gorilla, and enter my jungle. Go in my jungle. Go to the jungle committee and enter the playtesting jungle. And watch out for falling coconuts.
I don't know what's code word and real word.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I get it now. Cigarette. Okay, I clicked on the link and I understood. I was like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The jungle thing, there is actually a part of that server called the Jungle Committee, which is where we do playtests. So go in there, ask if anyone wants to play a game that you like, or see if there are anything's open, and get in there.
Okay.
Okay, this has been so wonderful. And I think it is both ironic and whatever the opposite of ironic is, incredibly appropriate that our panel of that's explicitly about sex and horny stuff has been one of the most wholesome ones ever. About first love yourself. I absolutely adore this. We are going to do a quick round of sign-offs. So I'm going to cue you in, and if you could tell me where people could find you on the internet, if they want to hear more of your incredible horny wisdom, I would appreciate that greatly. I'm going to go in the opposite order this time, starting with Austin.
Hey everybody, I'm also my pronouns are he, they, she. You can find me anywhere I want to be found on the internet at Sailor Skull, since at Sailor AC. Not A. I can spell Sailor SCT Austin because Scout is too long of a word, the internet decided. Or you can find me on my podcast, Secret Histories and Mysteries, Secret Histories and Mysteries, anywhere you get podcasts, Max Fun Weekly.
Heck yeah. And Eclipse, other than your jungle Discord, where might else the people find you?
You can find my name is Darling Demon Eclipse. My pronouns are she, that. You can find me on Twitch at Darling Demon Eclipse. I do a show called The Dove Code every Monday, most Mondays, where I talk to some really fun folks from the TTRPG scene. And you can also find all of my other stuff on eclipse.gay.
Incredible. Okay, next going around is Lex.
Hi everyone, I'm Lex, they, them, also known as Titanomachy RPG online. You can go to titanrpg.com. I've got a little redirect. It'll take you to my website where you can find all sorts of free resources for making your own games. We've been making sexy games lately, which is why I was invited to this panel very graciously, as I don't have a ton of kink experience. So thank you for having me. But yeah, we can figure it out together.
Amazing. Up next is Dylan.
Hello, I'm Dylan or Super Dylan. My pronouns are your pronouns, so just mirror those back to me. I am a game designer. I am the host of the One Shot podcast, which comes out weekly, and we showcase a different indie RPG every month with a new cast of characters. And if you are a Brooklyn local, you can sometimes find me running games, sexy and otherwise, at the Non-Binary Bookstore, a queer-owned and led bookstore. Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. And then we have Kate.
That's me. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Osborne. I go by Katiosaurus online wherever there's a Katiosaurus to be had. I am a sex educator and I focus on the intersection of neurodivergency and kink. So thanks for having me because this was the best. You can find me on my podcast, Sorry I Missed This, where I talk about ADHD and its impact on sex, intimacy, relationships, and communication. I also have a book coming out that you can pre-order. It's called The ADHD Field Guide for Adults. And I will be doing some live workshops in Los Angeles in July at the Stock Room and at Threshold LA, talking about neurodivergency, kink, and sensory issues. So if you want to check that out, you can go to my website, katiosaurus.com. Also, I write for Playboy, but I always forget to say that until the very end. Okay, bye.
All right. And thank you so much to our panelists for your incredible insights. Thank you so much to chat for being so involved, having so many. I feel like I need to go back and read all their insights. And I hope everyone here gets a chance to go play a game that's just a little bit sexier than what they played before. All right. Goodbye.